Okay, I have with me Stacy Jacob. She is an attorney with her own practice out in Brooklyn, New York. And the reason I am actually doing this episode is I've taken upon myself to actually interview local businesses to share how they got started in their business and to bring it to the public. The reason for that is the pandemic has actually hurt a lot of businesses, and so I am reaching out and using this to help them promote their business. So, Stacy, welcome.
Thank you, Benson. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. Since you are an attorney, what exactly do you specialize in?
My primary areas are immigration and guardianships, as well as uncontested divorces.
Okay. Do you? How long have you been actually had your practice?
My private practice I've had for over 9 years.
9 years. Okay. Did you go straight in right from college, or you work for someone?
Oh, I've worked a few places before having my private practice. After law school, I worked with a small pharmaceutical company. I've also worked as an assistant district attorney. So I've had a few experiences before taking on my own practice.
Okay. And how did you know what area to specialize in when you got into the business?
I would say it was mostly serendipity. I was working at an office and my colleague was doing a great amount of immigration and he knew that I had experience with immigration previous to coming to that office suite. So
Okay.
he invited me to work with him on some of his cases and I developed an increased interest in immigration. So I
Okay.
continued to do that.
And what about the other two areas?
For divorces, I'd also done some work with a small law firm doing divorces. So I continue to maintain that practice. For guardianships, a colleague of mine had suggested I explore that area that I might find it interesting. So I did, and he was right. It's a very challenging area. It deals with individuals who are incapacitated. So these are adult incapacitated individuals. And an individual could become incapacitated because of age, due to dementia, Alzheimer's, or because they've had a terrible accident, such as a bike accident, that leaves them incapacitated. So the individuals who are incapacitated could be in their 30s or they can be in their 80s.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let's go back to let's see, immigration. Well, what's going on in the world right now? What do you have any suggestions of people? I guess I mean, how has it affected your practice?
Immigration right now is very much so a hot topic. And I would advise people who are concerned about their status and their options for remaining legally in the country to reach out to me to explore it. There are some changes going on in the new administration. Many of the restrictive approaches to immigration that had been adopted by the Trump administration are being changed by the Biden administration. Some of those have already taken effect, and others are in the planning stage. The Biden administration has developed task forces to look at this. So the task force will see whether or not these changes that had been previously adopted have any merit to them, and whether or not there should be new approaches and how those new approaches should be adopted. And so I would advise individuals who are concerned or who are simply exploring their opportunities for obtaining a green card to reach out to me.
Okay. What about divorces? I mean, I guess everybody with the pandemic is all enclosed and everything. You see like a rise in divorces coming, or
Well, for my practice, being as I focus strictly on uncontested
uncontested?
divorces, I will admit that earlier on in the pandemic, there were more people looking to get a divorce. Now, I can't speak for everybody else's practice, but for me, my focus now has shifted more to the guardianships. People are still seeking the uncontested divorces, but it's I make a distinction between uncontested divorces and contested divorces. A contested divorce is a far lengthier process, and it usually takes place when there are issues such as not being able to agree on how the assets are divided up. With an uncontested divorce, the individuals are in agreement there with regard to the assets, with regard to any custody issues for children. And so it's very possible that people are in a just trying to figure out what their next steps are, whether or not they're going to move forward as a contested divorce or an uncontested divorce. But people are still getting divorces.
Okay. In terms of guardianship, how has that any changes with, I guess, in laws, recent laws?
Not necessarily I would focus on the laws, but I would focus on my personal practice with regard to guardianships. A number of my colleagues are seeming to be less interested in taking these cases. Traditionally, with guardianship cases, you have to meet with the alleged incapacitated person. So there's an attempt to balance whether or not you are comfortable going into the home, or if you can do this via Zoom. I know there was a point when a number of my colleagues, and to this day still, are very concerned about going into the homes, as well am I. If you're dealing with a 90-year-old, you certainly, even with your best precautions, you don't want to put them at risk of picking up a virus, the coronavirus, or some other challenges to their health, especially as they've been required to stay indoors for so long, potentially making them even more vulnerable.
Okay. Thank you. How exactly did you get your business started?
Well, I was working with a small law firm, and I decided that given the experience that I was obtaining, that it was something that I could manage to do on my own. And I knew what particular areas of law I was interested in. And it was simply a matter of finding a location that would provide the correct environment for me to flourish. And I did so.
Oh, okay. When you were in school, you must have been a bookworm to really absorb all that knowledge from school.
Well, it does require a lot of reading. And even as a child, I've always been into reading a lot of books. Now, you can see there's a lot of books behind me. Okay, admittedly, this is a Zoom background, I admit it. But I do like reading a lot.
How are you currently advertising your business?
It's mostly through referrals, networking.
Do you take on any kind of pro bono work, or?
Not specifically, but with some of the guardianship cases, they end up being that way because the alleged incapacitated person doesn't have the funds to pay, or their family members.
What do you do? What are you doing to give back to the community? I know that you do a lot of volunteer work also.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you want to discuss that on here.
Yeah. You know what, Benson? It won't help the interview, but right now, not much. I have a history of volunteering, but I mean, I don't really consider it volunteering what I do with related to my church. I'm a lector at the church, and I read every week, and I've been doing so even through the pandemic. So when individuals were unable to come out, I continued to go to church and serve as a lector because the Mass was being streamed so that other people can participate in the Mass. I also lector at another church and am responsible for coordinating the lectors for the evening Mass. I'm also a trustee on a church. So I don't know if that counts as traditional volunteering, but
For me, that counts. I mean, um, because it's part of your personality. It's part of helping people. Yeah. So that's why I asked that. Stace, do you by any chance have any kind of I mean, what are the recent books you're reading since you read so many books? Like, what's your favorite one so far?
well, I've let's look at what I'm reading. Whoops, I have a stack of books. One of the more interesting books I've been reading lately is actually entitled The Book.
The book.
The book. The book. Literally the book. And it's a fascinating study on human psychology, the way we think, the way we interpret ourselves and others, the way we approach life, and how we were trained to approach life. So it's really a fascinating study on the psyche. And what one of the books that I'm up to next is What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains.
Really?
Very interesting book. I would recommend it. So I like to choose books that contribute to my knowledge, that contribute to my understanding of people, the way we think, the choices that we make.
Okay.
I seldom read fiction books.
Okay.
I did try reading one a couple of months ago, but it just couldn't hold my attention. So any recommendations for really terrific fiction books, that's welcome. That being said, a few months ago, I did read a very engaging fiction book, The Power. That was incidentally one of Barack Obama's recommended, on his list of books. That was one of his choice books. I think it was for 2019. But when I picked it up, it was a funny story. I was over at the bookstore looking for a book. Just, I wanted to try something different. I thought to myself, well, I don't normally do fiction, so let's try it. Let's see something. And that title caught my attention. And as I was reading it, I came across elsewhere. This is just pure coincidence. I was going through some paperwork and I came across a list that I had printed out of Barack Obama's top books for a particular year. And looking through the list, I saw that at the top of the list and I thought, that's too funny. I picked the book not because of Barack Obama's recommendation. It was just per chance, but apparently it was a book that I had at some point wanted to read anyway. So that was good fiction, disturbing, but good fiction. So that's what I've been reading. And right now I'm sticking with nonfiction. Back to nonfiction.
Sounds good. Do you, as a lawyer, since you guys are always so busy, do you have any kind of like morning routine you get up? Because I've read some lawyers, they get up like 4 o'clock in the morning and they go do exercise. They go do a whole bunch of stuff before they get into office about 7 o'clock in the morning.
I do have a morning routine. My morning routine begins the night before. Oh. I have a notebook that I write down what I want to accomplish in the morning. And it's not necessarily work related because I have a list of what needs to be done on my calendar for work. My morning routine actually consists of the personal goals more so. So the night before, as an example, it often has the same things. I write down what I want to accomplish, which includes practicing a couple of different languages, doing some reading, doing some exercise. So I want to make sure that I get these things in, and what helps to keep me on track for doing that is writing it down the night before. So there's this kind of accountability, and it also gives a little bit of inspiration to get me motivated to get up in the morning and accomplish these goals. For example, I am working on learning Mandarin. So
you are? Okay.
I am.
Too bad I'm not going to be able to speak it with you.
I'm not going to be able to speak it with you either. I'm still learning. So that's one of the languages, and another language that I have an interest in. So I have a couple of languages that I'd like to develop some comfort level with, so I can have a basic conversation. So that's how I like to start my days, knowing that I've accomplished these goals so far. And sometimes it involves simpler things that I put on my list, such as water my plants. I've got to remember to do that. Sometimes, I get caught up in trying to take care of different things that I may forget something basic. So I try to put that on the list, so I remember to do that. But
Okay.
it's usually more so centered around self-improvement goals for the morning.
Okay. Hey, one question I forgot to ask you is what would actually make a good client for you?
A good client is somebody who is organized. That really helps a lot, particularly
Okay.
with immigration matters.
Okay.
When they have their paper for let me explain. Let's say we're dealing with somebody who is seeking a employment-based green card, and that person has an advanced degree and believes that they have an endeavor that would justify them obtaining a national interest waiver. If that person has their documents together, has their research papers together, their endeavor has been well outlined and described, has a list of who they would like to use as references, if they're organized, that makes my job smoother, and it enables me to better prepare their package. Of course, I can do it even if they're a mess, but for both of us, it makes it a little bit smoother when they have all their papers together and they're organized.
It's a rate lower or higher if they're more organized, so you're doing less work, or the same?
No, it's really the same rate. It's
Okay.
it's really, it's the same fee,
Okay.
whether they are or they're not, because I still have to put together my part of it. So ultimately, I'm the one who's going to be organizing all the documents. I'm the one who's going to be preparing the package and the story, so to speak, for USCIS.
Okay.
Their organization helps them, particularly because they can get the documents to me faster, and I have to ask less times, and they have to spend less time looking for it.
Okay. I know you're based in Brooklyn. How far, as a lawyer, do you take clients from?
It's when it comes to immigration,
Okay.
there's great flexibility.
Okay.
When you're dealing with immigration law, it's federal law. So
Okay.
if that client is in California, Florida, Oklahoma, or New York, I can still take the case.
Okay. Awesome.
But it depends on the type of case whether I would take it. If an individual is, for example, seeking to adjust their status and get their green card through marriage, and they lived in California, I would refer it to a colleague of mine, because chances are they're going to have to go for the green card interview.
Okay.
And unless they don't think they need their attorney to go with them, it's advisable for them to have somebody local who can go to the interview with them. And just in terms of expenses, instead of flying me in to go to an interview in California, you might as well just hire somebody in California.
Okay. What about the other two? Divorce and guardians.
Guardianships, that is really New York City based.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
New York
And
City
for
itself or New York State?
New York City,
New York City. Okay.
based.
5
That
boroughs.
is New York City based. Those for the guardianship cases, most of those are appointments by the court.
Okay.
And I am on what's called Part 36 with the court, which means I'm on a list of attorneys that the court chooses to be appointed either as a guardian, a court evaluator, or the counsel for the alleged incapacitated person.
Okay.
For divorces, that can be New York statewide, especially since we've been doing most of this by Zoom. But my clients tend to be from New York City. So whether that's the Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, Manhattan, or Brooklyn, it's still New York City. Although I can take cases from anywhere in New York.
I think. Oh, my last question is, where exactly are you from? I ask this for everybody, so.
Ah, yes. Well, I grew up mostly in Brooklyn, New York.
I think that I am out of questions.
That's okay.
Good morning, Chapter 15 and guests. I'm Stacy Jacob, your immigration law attorney, and today I'm taking you on a journey into the world of immigration. New York City is one of the most diverse places in America. For many foreign nationals, America is their destination, but New York is their dream. My cases bring me to 26 Federal Plaza in Manhattan. It's a brief but gritty trip from my office in downtown Brooklyn. It's not always a pretty sight through our city subway system, but it's a direct line from my office to USCIS offices at 26 Federal Plaza. Let's talk about the types of visas there are. There are immigrant visas and non-immigrant visas. First, immigrant visas. Immigrant visas are issued to foreign nationals who plan to live and work permanently in the United States. In many cases, a relative or employer sponsors the individual by filing an application with the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. Certain applicants, such as workers with extraordinary ability and investors, can petition on their own behalf and do not need a family member or employer to sponsor them. The application is later forwarded to the appropriate U.S. consulate or embassy overseas for continued processing and the issuance of the immigrant visa to the intending immigrant if that intending immigrant is eligible. The Department of State suspended routine visa services worldwide in March 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In July 2020, U.S. embassies and consulates began a phased resumption of routine visa services on an embassy-by-embassy basis. Non-immigrant visas are issued to foreign nationals seeking to enter the United States on a temporary basis for tourism, business, medical treatment, and certain types of temporary work. The type of non-immigrant visa needed is related to the purpose of the trip, of the travel. Generally, an individual applies directly to the U.S. consulate or embassy abroad for a tourist visa or business non-immigrant visa, the B visas. However, foreign nationals seeking to enter the United States to study or work may require authorization and documentation prior to applying for a non-immigrant visa. In addition to the B visas, non-immigrant visas include E visas, the treaty traders and investors, as well as Australians, the K visa for fiancés of U.S. citizens, H visas for temporary workers, and it also includes not just the engineers, but also the models. L visas for intra-company transfers, O visas for those with extraordinary ability or achievement, as well as P visas for artists, athletes, and entertainers. Let's turn back to foreign nationals who plan to live and work permanently in the United States. Once the foreign national is the beneficiary of an approved immigrant petition and an immigrant visa number is immediately available to them, there are two ways to apply for lawful permanent resident status, aka a green card. If you are outside the United States, that the foreign national may apply at a U.S. Department of State consulate abroad for an immigrant visa to come into the United States and be admitted as a permanent resident. This is referred to as consular processing. If the foreign national is already in the United States, he or she can apply for permanent resident status without having to return to his or her home country to complete the processing. This is called adjustment of status. In the adjustment of status scenario, the foreign national's green card application is processed in the United States, which is done at USCIS offices. Let's talk about the paths to a green card. There's family-based, employment-based, and investment-based immigration. Family immigration is the primary basis for legal immigration to the United States. Under current immigration law, U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents can sponsor certain family members for a visa that provides permanent residence. Under this category are included spouses of U.S. citizens, unmarried children under 21 of U.S. citizens, and parents of U.S. citizens who are at least 21 years of age. Also included are unmarried sons and daughters of U.S. citizens, as well as the spouses and minor children of legal permanent residents, aka green card holders. Turning to employment-based immigration, this path provides foreign nationals with several ways to become lawful permanent residents through employment in the United States. These employment-based EB preference categories include foreign nationals with extraordinary ability in the sciences, arts, education, athletics, business, as well as outstanding professors and researchers and certain multinational managers and executives. Finally, let's look at the investment-based immigration category. Technically, it is under the employment-based immigration category. Immigration law allows certain foreign nationals who have invested or are in the process of investing $1 million or $500,000 in targeted employment areas in a new commercial enterprise that will benefit the U.S. economy and create at least 10 full-time positions for the employees. These foreign nationals are sometimes called EB-5 immigrant investors because they are in the employment-based fifth preference visa category, hence EB-5. Now, what I'd like to do is do a sort of a case study. Let's look at family-based immigration. And here we have Bibi and John. They've been married for about 2 years. Bibi, the wife, was filed for by John. John was once divorced, as far as Bibi knows. Now, time has gone by, and Bibi and John are getting divorced. Bibi does have her green card. It's 5 years later, and Bibi plans to naturalize. She submits her application. She's now made it to the interview. And during the interview, a few complications arise. She discovers that John had not previously divorced his prior wife. In fact, John's what one would call a serial marrier. He's been married 5 times before and never divorced any of them, which means that the marriage between Bibi and John is not valid. Since Bibi obtained her green card through John based on marriage, and the marriage is no longer valid, not only can Bibi not naturalize, she also does not have a valid green card and is no longer legally in the country, which means next step for her, unfortunately, is being placed into removal proceedings. Talking about immigration in general, part of my inquiry with new clients is to find out whether the foreign national is trying to remain in the country permanently or just here for a limited period of time. In other words, are they seeking to immigrate to the U.S. or seeking a non-immigrant visa that allows them to remain in the U.S. temporarily? Or is the foreign national seeking a non-immigrant visa as a quasi-stepping stone to a green card? I explore the possibilities with the foreign national and work with them toward achieving their immigration-related goals.
So why do they do it? Because it's worth it. Because when you arrive in this country and you see all the opportunities, you want more of that. You want to be the one who can say, hey, I've come to New York and I've done it. I am a U.S. citizen.
Let's talk about referrals. Great referrals are law firms without an immigration law practice, as well as attorneys who do not practice immigration law and are looking for an attorney to refer such cases to. Tech companies, foreign national entrepreneurs seeking to start a business in the United States, talented foreign nationals exploring their options for remaining in the U.S., as well as foreign nationals seeking green cards through marriage or employment. Thank you all for your attention. Once again, I'm Stacy Jacob, your immigration law attorney.